thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Medicine X has been part of our journey since the very beginning. So it's great to kind of come back and be amidst friends and give you an update in terms of this journey. But I wanted to kind of, just give you a sense of what it is that we're doing at Friendslearn. We're a startup. We're focused on social impact. We've been at this for about 8 years now. We're self-funded and we're based in India. And then we also have a small presence here in Palo Alto. What this is about, this is going to be a story about medical education, really to empower people and putting kind of the power in their own hands to give them a sense of agency, to be able to make healthier decisions and therefore prevent a whole number of diseases. So we've been thinking about this for the last 7-8 years now, and what we've done is built a body of work in terms of being able to, built on neuroscience research and psychology research, really using gaming and VR as a way to influence children's food habits and ultimately improving their risk profile for a number of diseases tied to nutritional habits. So I wanted to kind of also acknowledge that we've been able to do this only because of some tremendous partnerships and with researchers and scientists in this area of behavioral science, ranging from Stanford to Carnegie Mellon, Baylor College of Medicine, the KU Medical Center, Johns Hopkins University, and Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. But our work now, after 7 or 8 years of kind of working in this field, is really being thought of as a way to develop a digital vaccine for a number of lifestyle diseases. And when we influence food, as many of you can imagine, it touches on so many aspects of our health, ranging from our risk for diabetes to heart disease to certain types of cancer and perhaps even mental health areas. So I wanted to kind of give you a bit of a story and a background to give you some context as to how we got here and what my personal trigger was. So I'm an engineer by training. I'm a mechanical engineer. I moved to the US for graduate school, really to pursue a passion of mine at the time, which was racing cars. I came to study automotive engineering. But I was always on the simulation side of the world. And then I had a chance to build a company based on research I was doing in graduate school at the University of Michigan. And after exiting that company, I actually started another company in the space of VR and gaming, mostly with an educational application to help universities recruit students through what felt like an Xbox-style kind of a platform for student recruiting. So kids, this was on a PC, mostly where prospective students could feel like they were on campus and interact with others as they were going through this complicated process of determining which university to attend. We ultimately sold that company, and then I spent a few brief years, what I would look upon as kind of the dark days of my career in finance. I was actually in the hedge fund world. But I wanted to give you that context because it led me to a trigger that shifted my mind. It was seven years ago. My daughter, I became a parent. I have 3 daughters now, but my oldest, who's about 8 years old, really got me to think about the world very differently, to think about children's nutrition very differently. And so I became sensitized to kind of what was being presented to them in terms of influencing their preferences. And I was able to see it through her eyes. And what I saw was something that I could not accept after a certain point, after a certain amount of thinking about it. What I realized was, perhaps some of you can relate to this, but apparently kids these days are kind of born with the software and the hardware drivers to literally, be able to use an iPhone without any tutorial, right? It's purely tactile. Kids, even before they can speak, can swipe and get to YouTube and use this even before they can express themselves. So I was completely mesmerized when I saw this. But what struck me was one time when my daughter was using her digital pacifier, because that was the only way we could get her to sit in the car seat in the back of the car. And she would get to YouTube and start watching episodes of Dora and Peppa Pig. But what struck me was one time in between these episodes, she was getting all these ads. She was getting these ads for Coca-Cola, she was getting ads for McDonald's, she was getting ads for Capri Sun, she was getting ads for Kellogg's cereal. So when I first noticed that, I thought there was something wrong about that, and it bothered me a lot. But I didn't know what to do about it. But within 24 hours, this happened. We were walking through the grocery aisle with her on the cart. And you know, she noticed at her eye level, she notices these boxes of Dora. That's her superhero, so she's not going to miss it. And it just turns out that she was so fixated that she wants what's in the box. I realized it was Star Cinnamon cereal, so I was trying desperately to distract this 2-year-old, but it turned from a fixation to a full-blown tantrum, and I had to take evasive action. I didn't know what to do except buy the box and try to escape from the store. But that's when I realized that the advertising industry is so sophisticated, has perfected ways to get into the minds of children at such a young age, even before their sense of associations are formed, even before probably their tastes and their preferences are formed. But here they are being able to influence what a child wants and is beginning to think as breakfast food. And then once we bought that, you know, good luck trying to get her to eat traditional Indian, breakfast food. It was just not going to be able to compete, right? So that was something that I could not get out of my head. And I began to think much more deeply, given what I had experienced as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as an engineer. And I started thinking about, okay, how do we kind of come up with a solution instead of being upset about the problem? So I dug deep. I kind of, had a bit of an epiphany when I realized that, these are these trends that are shaping our world. These are the trends that were going to influence technology. We realized that mobile devices were going to be in a lot more children's hands than just kids in the US. These smartphones were a way by which we could actually reach children, potentially with a solution, if we can develop one. And having kind of developed a company in the VR space where firsthand I experienced how powerful it was in being able to motivate applicants towards college, I realized that there was some magic in it, and that there was a way by which if we could bring it down to a mobile device and really condition children about nutrition and health, then we empower them to make healthier decisions for themselves. That was when Friendslearn was born. But we began to think much more deeply about this. It's like, how do we get as sophisticated as the marketing agencies or the big food companies that are able to get deeply within the mind of children and are able to kind of create these associations? It isn't by accident that McDonald's is a Happy Meal, Coca-Cola advertises happiness. Everything is about this association that creates a habit, and early in life. So we realized that through the power of VR and through gaming, we can actually begin to leave a very deep imprint in the minds of children and create these associations, hopefully in favor of their health. And so we actually began to think of this as a way to develop a solution. We actually partnered with Amanda Bruce at Children's Mercy Hospital at Kansas Medical Center in Kansas City. And she does several of our neuroimaging studies, so using fMRI and EEG to really be able to look at the impact or look at the neural activity that we're able to trigger through what feels like gaming. And slowly we've realized that it's this area of what's called cognitive behavior therapy. And we're able to do that through what feels like entertainment. But this was getting beyond Friendslearn's mission as a nutrition education company, because given our mission that we wanted to improve health, we started asking the question, does what we do actually improve the health of children? And if so, can we see whether it's done, whether it is possible in some measurable and quantifiable way? So this led us down this slippery slope, or this rabbit hole really, because I, as an engineer, was naive, had no idea what we were signing up for when we said we were going to try to do clinical trials. And we started working with some eminent researchers at Baylor College of Medicine. They have a Children's Nutrition Research Center, and we worked with them, and they kind of designed our very first randomized control protocol to look at the impact of what we were developing in terms of raising awareness of children about nutrition. So they ran the first preclinical studies to look at how we could influence their knowledge and their awareness. Then it led to a kind of a basis upon which they could say, okay, increasing awareness leads to self-efficacy and therefore leads to behavior change. And so they tested whether this actually was going to be backable by evidence, and ran a second kind of a randomized controlled trial, and involving middle school children in Houston. And they found that the kids that actually got the application would go to a cafeteria, and out of their own volition would be making much healthier choices. So we were able to go into their mind and influence their preference such that they would take action upon that. So that was by far the most exciting thing that we'd seen in a fundamental way, that we could use the power of mobile VR and influence children towards healthier behaviors. So this was a study that was conducted by the principal investigators, Dr. Jenny Moreno and Dr. Craig Johnston at Baylor College of Medicine. And it was then presented and published at several medical conferences, including Obesity Week and the Childhood Obesity Conference. But then this got us down a path, because now we began to ask the research-based question about, is this behavior sustainable? How long will it last? So then we worked with ExxonMobil Foundation and the Bernard Harris Summer Science Camp, and with some researchers from Kaiser Permanente, that really looked at the Summer Science Camp is a 2-week camp that ExxonMobil Foundation funds for children across the country. There's over 12 or maybe 14 university sites. These children from underprivileged backgrounds get a full scholarship. And the purpose of the foundation's the summer camp is really to motivate these kids to go towards STEM fields. We convinced them to also think about promoting health, and they bought into that idea. And this was a 2-week camp, so where these kids would be provided all room and board, so all their food, everything was going to be provided on site. So these researchers then tracked these children, and again they began to see that we could, over a period of time, over a period of 2 weeks, we were able to see these significant increase in consumption of water as opposed to sugary beverages. We saw a significant decrease in the consumption of processed food, an increase in the consumption of fresh fruit, and so on. So it gave us a little more kind of confidence, and we were slowly beginning to see how we could shape a habit as it was being formed in these children. The next set of studies that we did, most recently, actually was in partnership with Johns Hopkins University, researchers from the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and also in collaboration with researchers from Carnegie Mellon University. So now we're getting to a point where this is at the intersection of gaming, it is at the intersection of personalized learning, it's about behavior design, but also it's about a digital vaccine that could potentially begin to reduce the risk for lifestyle diseases. And it also involved a great deal of personalization, because as we heard at the earlier keynote this morning, medicine should really be focused on an individual. And there was a way by which we could use technology and machine learning and AI to really personalize how this content was being presented to a particular child. So then we partnered with Carnegie Mellon University and undertook another study, which is really a dose effect study, a dose response study. Essentially, they looked at one exposure to a randomized controlled study design. They basically looked at how long the effect lasts in terms of behaviors, And then they also looked at whether a successive exposure or a successive dose was going to kind of have an impact. And what they found was actually presented and published at the World Congress on Medical Informatics and Precision Healthcare in 2017, and found its way as a paper in Proceedings of MedInfo 2017. And it's also been presented at several other conferences. And so where we are right now is to really think of this as an intervention over looking at longitudinal outcomes, much like any vaccine gets kind of developed across a population, such that we can actually look at long-term consequences and risk profile. We are currently partnered with Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, where there's an adaptation of Fooya, which we built specifically for type 1 diabetic children. This is designed to get these kids to be able to better manage their diabetes. It teaches them and kind of empowers them to make decisions about how much insulin to take, when to take it, how many units, as well as how can they balance, how do they count carbs, how do they balance their blood sugar levels, and how do they measure for ketones, when do they measure for ketones, so on and so forth. And it's a trial that's underway right now. So our phase 3 trials is kind of where we're going in the future. And I would like to kind of also acknowledge the team, our scientific advisory board. We have kind of tremendous scientists who have helped shape this. But I must also say our participation at Medicine X, we've been involved in presenting this idea since 2014. So none of this would have happened if not for this community that has really helped kind of shape the thinking, as well as kind of give us a guidepost for what it is that we should be targeting in the future. But this is some of our research collaborators from Carnegie Mellon. M.S. Swaminathan is a noted nutritionist and a plant geneticist in India. We have Ingrid Libman, Ramaya Krishnan, Craig Johnston, Uttara Bharat is a PI at Johns Hopkins University. Liana Gefter is at Stanford Medical School and is a program manager of the Stanford Diabetes Youth Coaching Program. Rema Padman is a machine learning expert at Carnegie Mellon University. Amanda Bruce is a neuroscientist at Kansas Medical Center. And Sharon Tan is at NUS. So we're also beginning to think about this globally. We feel like, one of the things that I'm deeply passionate about is kind of the status of global health. Non-communicable diseases in India, where I'm from, is really kind of a catastrophe. With Johns Hopkins, we actually ran a portion of our most recent trial in India. And they estimate that 1 in 5 urban school children in India today is pre-diabetic, which would mean that we would end up with a population bigger than the United States with diabetes in the not so distant future. So between India, China, other parts of Asia, this is already kind of beyond a tsunami. And I feel inspired to try and think about a scalable solution that can actually work across our planet. And so I wanted to kind of give you, show you a short video.
Welcome to the 2018 Fooya Health Championship finale.
So here are the 4 contestants, the final contestants. I'm as excited as they are. So how do you feel, Bhargav?
It's an absolutely exciting time because these revolutionaries who are here up on the stage are mean warriors, battle-tested over the last day, being able to challenge and beat out a lot of competition.
Exactly.
So we're the top 4 contestants who are going to fight and compete for top honors today.
Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Fooya! Go, game on. And the contestants are all off to the races. Here we are. It's going to load very quickly. This is a final round, so the contestants are going to be challenged differently from what they've experienced now. So lots of new stuff, testing their ability to be able to handle and manage and beat out all the things that are challenging them as far as their fitness is concerned. The contestants are not wasting any time. I already see double takes and quadra feast. Abhinav just scored a quadra feast and a triple feed there from Murari. All participants know what they're doing. These are the best of the best. Mind you, ladies, gentlemen, and children. Look at this going. This battle is going to last a grand 5 minutes, so it's fast-paced. Lots of quick choices, strategic decisions, all about staying fit and healthy.
So I kind of sprang that upon you, kind of without really giving you a hint of what was coming. But we figured out, we think, part of what I would greatly appreciate your feedback, because we think that the digital vaccine presents a very unique opportunity for us to actually be able to distribute via mass media. So we think that we can actually, at this point, with the evidence that we have, be able to scale through what feels like an esports style television show. We piloted this, and I'm embarrassed to say, I guess I made my debut as a television anchor. I have a long way to go. But the idea that we can actually now, deliver something that is sensational enough, or we aspire for it to be an America's Got Talent, but we can potentially cover an entire country and change the trajectory of its public health. So with that, I kind of wanted to, take questions, get some feedback, and get your advice, because we're looking for ideas in terms of being able to do, continued data collection. We want to monitor effectiveness of this approach as we kind of look at a transmedia going from mobile app and mobile gaming. How do we kind of now look at the impact and collect evidence in terms of, a television episode that we are thinking about, and further kind of the science in the field. So with that, I want to thank you so much for your attention.
Hello? Perfect. We can take questions from the audience, and I can walk by if you put your hand up. If
do some physical exercise. That's really interesting use of the sort of multimedia. So Dr. George Morgan-Smith from Melbourne, Australia. Are you creating resources that support the parents to go with the kids so they're learning at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. So far, what we didn't show, there's versions in the product that enable kind of moms to kind of onboard, so when they're downloading it for their children. So I should also say that we're shifting gears from our clinical research focus, where we were really looking at the neuroscience and kind of how to influence the habits of children when the habits are being formed. We recognize that parents play a huge role, and especially moms play a big role in their child's health. So there is a feature now. We're building a set of features. I guess the power of this technology is that we build, we learn, we revise, we refine, we rebuild. So now we're building a set of features for moms so that they can take kind of action and monitor and be a part of this conversation, as well as even moderate what their children are doing and who they're playing with, because there's a multiplayer version as well. So kids can play against their friends. And so how can moms be a part of that and facilitate that, but also be engaged in the conversation about health? Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, thanks for your talk. So you mentioned that you want to maybe start using mass media, maybe create an esport-like platform or some sort. So I was wondering if you looked into live streaming platforms like YouTube or Twitch, or if it's not live streaming, then maybe just using YouTube for like creating series that maybe aren't on TV but are just available on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. We've thought about that. I think for us, we have a bit of a unique situation only because sometimes our kids, the children who are using this are, 13 or younger. So we don't want to expose them in any way that could potentially cause any risk, right? But at the same time, we recognize that esports kind of has these kind of channels through which they're able to distribute at much larger scale. We have at least piloted and prototyped some of our own versions of live streaming, so it's much more in a walled garden kind of a technology environment. So it's much safer, so only their friends or kind of verified users can kind of look at what they're doing and play. But for children who are older than 13, we certainly, Twitch and YouTube would be fantastic channels. But our focus is really on based on all the science, our focus has really been on children before they hit puberty, because the malleability of the brain and the plasticity, I guess, we're able to kind of strengthen neural circuits and have greater impact in those first few years. So that's the nature of the demographic that we're catering to. I think there was a question here.
Great.
A great presentation. Tell us what your best case vision for it's a superb concept that's just got to happen. What's your best case vision for it, and what's it going to take to get it done?
I guess as a founder, you always are fueled by the best case, kind of idealistic possibility, looking at the glass half full. I think, for us we envision a world where in the future we can be embedded into public health protocols. We envision a world where in the future, just like you can vaccinate for polio, you can vaccinate for smallpox, we should have some solution that can move humanity towards, or away from all these preventable diseases. The question is, what is the path to that? We're trying to approach organizations like the WHO, UNICEF, to really become part of public health protocols, educational curriculum standards, the essential medicines list. So these are conversations that we have going. But in the ideal world, I would say, we've gotten this far with self-funding and trying to, move, not give up because of our sense of mission. But we're climbing an enormous mountain. Like, we know that we have a lot of pushback from all kinds of unexpected places. There's a lot of, like we were discussing earlier in the panel or the speaker in the morning, a world of capitalism and greed, if you want to call it that. Everybody is incentivized to keep us all sick. Everybody makes a buck and is able to, in the name of capitalism, create wealth and capture wealth when we get sick. And it is true for our children, and more than adults, because as adults, at least we have our insurance service provider, at least in the West, we have insurance service providers to try and make a case to keep us healthy. But for kids, I've heard like the top people at insurance service providers say they can't justify a financial investment in children because by the time they get these diseases, they're even outside of their network, right? So that's where we are. I think ideally, I'd like to, this is my thesis even coming out of the hedge fund world, thinking about capitalism. I'd like to kind of bring these two worlds together to intersect, where we can deliver impact at scale through science, but also do it in some kind of self-sustaining and financially self-sustaining way. But we need capital to be able to do population health studies. These are huge undertakings, and as much as we have academic partners, they're trying to raise money through NIH funding and such, but that's a very long, drawn-out process. Capital would certainly help us establish undeniably like a body of phase 3 equivalent evidence for how we can reduce the risk for diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and several mental health tied to poor nutrition. We'd also like, in an ideal world, to have great partners who can fuel kind of the reach of what we've done with the evidence that we already have, and be able to stand in front of organizations like the WHO and the FDA and be able to make the case for why digital vaccines can be a much more elegant solution to keeping people healthy, as opposed to focusing on making them well after they get sick. This one. I don't know how are we doing on time. Sorry, I don't know if we had.
I'll give you one quick question.
Yeah. So I was, pausing and saying, okay, this is absolutely appropriate for children and gaming and so forth. But actually, there's a lot of older adults that actually resonate to gaming. So are you thinking beyond the pediatric group? I'm not, but I know patients have come to me and with apps used a gaming walking app, and that keeps them walking.
Oh, absolutely. The power of it in across the population is significant. And a lot of what we've known, especially when it comes to not gamifying, say, exercise and things like that, because we've taken a slightly different approach. Like we're trying to almost influence the wiring in the mind to give them a mental decision framework to make better decisions, right? It's not even like enabling or incentivizing healthier behavior on the outside. So our approach differs from a lot of other apps out there because we're trying to go within and to create that framework from within. But we also know that the neuroscience supports that children respond better, and that those early kind of habits are strong predictors of lifelong risk, right? So we've stayed narrowly focused also because we've on this demographic and this mission, but we know a lot now that can apply to across the entire population. So if we see ourselves in the future, we'd like to use children as kind of an entry point into families, and then change the habits of families in the same way fast food companies or Kellogg cereal tries to get in the mind of children and then get us all to eat sugary cereal, right? So hopefully we can utilize some of that thinking in favor of health.